In the book of Genesis chapter 6 verse 2 it is written, "The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose." This scripture has puzzled many readers over the centuries. The biggest debate has often been in the fact that many people keep wondering if the sons of God mentioned here were fallen angels, and they also deny the fact that the fallen angels could not have slept with daughters of men because angels are spirit beings. In this video, I will debunk this theory and explain who the sons of God were and how they could have bypassed to reproduce with human women even though they were spirit beings. So without wasting your time, let's get into it. To address this issue, let's start by taking a closer look at what the scripture says. In Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4 it says, "And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown." There are three main things we need to isolate from this passage. The first is to find out who the sons of God were. The second is to determine if they truly slept with daughters of men, and finally to find out the real reason why they might have done so. In the original Hebrew, the phrase sons of God is Bane Elohim. Breaking this down, Bane means sons, while Elohim is the common Hebrew word for God. Throughout the Old Testament, when the term sons of God is used, it is always in reference to angelic beings rather than human offspring. This is because angels were created directly by God, unlike humans who were created from the dust of the ground or born of humans. For example, in the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 6, we read, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them." Another example is in the book of Psalms, chapter 89, verse 6, where we read, "For who in the heaven can be compared unto the Lord? Who among the sons of God can be likened unto him?" Here the sons of God are again the angels who worship God and are incomparable to him. Therefore the sons of God in Genesis 6 are also angels, but not the holy ones who serve God, but the fallen ones who rebelled against him. These are the same angels who followed Satan in his rebellion and were cast out of heaven, as we read in the book of Revelation chapter 12 verses 7 to 9. Some claim the sons of God were descendants of godly men like Seth, while the daughters of men were from the line of Cain. However, this argument lacks scriptural support. Nowhere are the Sethites called sons of God. And why would intermarriage between righteous and unrighteous lines produce an entire race of giants? That defies both science and scripture. The offspring of this union were giants and mighty men, who were called the Nephilim. The word Nephilim comes from the word Naphal, which means the fallen ones, or those who cause others to fall. These beings were not fully human nor fully angelic, but they inherited the traits of both. This indicates that they were not normal humans, but hybrids of angelic and human nature. If the sons of God were the sons of godly men, then their children would not be different from other humans, but they would be ordinary descendants of Adam. Now your next question, you might ask, is that if indeed the fallen angels slept with daughters of men, how did they manage to do that, given the fact that angels are spirit beings? This is a good question, and the answer is very simple. They took on human forms. In the book of Genesis chapter 18, the Lord appeared to Abraham in the form of 3 men and shared a meal with him. In Genesis 19, 2 angels came to Sodom appearing as ordinary men, so much so that the wicked men of Sodom threatened to sleep with them. Hebrews chapter 13 verse 2 reminds us to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels unawares. Now if angels can take the form of men, eat and interact on a human level, it is plausible that they could have sexual relations with women as well. Some also argue against this with the fact that Jesus stated in Matthew chapter 22 verse 30 that angels do not marry in heaven. However, he was speaking of angels who maintain their proper place. He was responding to a hypothetical question about marriage in the resurrection. He was not making a definitive statement about all angelic capabilities. Additionally, the angels in Genesis 6 were clearly engaging in immoral, unlawful relationships, not marital bonds. The rebellious ones defied God's natural order, and so because they were no longer obedient to God, they chose to do what they liked. In the book of Jude, verse 6, it refers to these angels leaving their own habitation, meaning they abandoned their proper heavenly domain. Therefore, their unions violated the boundaries between spiritual and physical. Jude 6-7 confirms that these angels left their first estate and went after strange flesh, just as the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah attempted to do. Notice that it compares their actions to those of Sodom and Gomorrah, meaning it had to do with sexual immorality. Additionally, in the book of 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4-5, it describes these angels. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment, God cast the fallen angels into Tartarus or hell as a divine prison because they left their proper habitation and lusted after human women. Their actions have eternal consequences as they await final judgment. Though they do not have reproductive organs per se because they were angels, they were more than capable of materializing in male human form just as they sometimes do. We know this because Genesis 18 shows that angels who visited Abraham and Sarah ate. The angels that visited Lot also ate. Though angels do not have digestive systems, they were able to fully participate in both meals. In the same way, fallen angels had the capability of manifesting the physiology needed to engage in sexual relations. The word used for took wives suggests they took the women by force, and the words went in unto specifically denote sexual intercourse. Whenever Scripture refers to lawful intimacy between a husband and wife, like with Adam and Eve, the word knew is used instead. For example, in Genesis chapter 4 verse 1, it states that Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain. The original Hebrew word translated knew is yada, meaning to know through experience or intimate experience, reinforcing the physical bond between husband and wife as God's design. In Matthew 1 verses 24-25 regarding Jesus' conception, it states that Joseph knew her not till she had brought forth her firstborn son, again employing yada to describe the physical aspects of marriage reserved for a husband and wife. Now this raises the question, why would angels do this in the first place? The answer is simple. They did so in order to stop God's plan for the birth of Jesus Christ. Recall that in Genesis 3 verse 15, when God cursed the serpent, he prophesied that the seed of woman would crush the serpent's head, a foretelling of the Messiah's victory over Satan. Realizing this, Satan would have inspired his fallen angels to corrupt the human bloodline so that the Messiah would not be able to come through a pure human lineage. By corrupting human DNA and producing an abominable offspring with the women, the fallen angels may have been trying to thwart God's prophecy of the Messiah. This would explain God's drastic judgment to wipe out all flesh upon the earth with a flood. And this would explain why the Bible emphasized Noah being perfect in his generations in Genesis 6 verse 9. The emphasis was to show that his bloodline was still pure enough to bring about God's redemptive plan. So while we cannot know the full logistics of how the fallen angels accomplished these acts, the biblical record confirms they did commit this abominable sin which merited God's wrath. The warning for us today is to avoid compromise with sin and contamination with ungodly influences. While we do not wrestle with evil angels in a physical sense, the lusts of the flesh and pride of life constantly war against our spirit. We must stay vigilant through prayer and faith in Jesus Christ. He alone can deliver us from the enemy's schemes to derail God's purposes in our lives and in the world. May we walk in purity and truth until the day Jesus returns to make all things new. So there you have it. Thank you for watching. If you love our videos, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel.